Chapter 9-11. At least one of Liang Lu, Luonan and Zhang Zhao's mouths had been blessed. With the prediction of the situation still ringing in their ears, after a brief meeting, the base's military resolution team announced that the relay station was executing a Level 2 pollution response and entering a state of emergency. In accordance with the standard of falling into the medium-level evil poison contamination area, the various drill rules and regulations were strictly implemented. Don't be fooled by the word strict hanging on the announcement. From Luonan's perspective, the drill rules and regulations he had learned some time ago would have to be abolished by at least half if they were to be implemented according to the new rules. The feeling it gave people was that of a dust-free electronic workshop, where every cubic meter of air contained specks of dust, had a sudden change in style. It had become a steel mill with surging heat waves and flowing molten iron. At the same time, the worker bees within the 3 hives cancelled all rest and rearranged their positions. They were required to familiarize themselves with their new jobs in the shortest amount of time possible and enter a state of mind. The so-called rearrangement was done in accordance with Xing Zhan's suggestion to Chang'e Hui, substantially reduce the number of people in charge of daily maintenance at the base and fill them up with direct production positions. The direct result of this adjustment was that all the maintenance soldiers became the busiest group of people in the logistics department in a single leap. There was no one else. While their former colleagues were scrambling to adapt to their new production positions, Liang Lu and Luonan, who remained in their original positions, needed to be in charge of a maintenance area several times larger than before. For example, the previous 2nd Patrol Team for the maintenance of the Central Pipeline and Safety Partition Area Extension had now become the maintenance team for the Global Pipeline Extension Area. It had been merged with 2 other personnel of the same post into a large team, and it was led by a senior lieutenant. However, the area of responsibility had increased by more than 10 times. Under these circumstances, if they were to strictly follow the routine drill rules and carry out maintenance tasks, they would need to chop 2 people into 10 pieces, 20 pieces, and then blow a mouthful of immortal energy to form a clone. Only then would they be able to meet the basic requirements. Under the pressure of reality, they were bound to give up some things. Full Yenwei Division 2 has discovered a low pollution area. Coordinates. Don't waste time. Just stare at the pipelines, equipment, and maintenance machines. Don't pay attention to anything else. Even if the living evil poison reaches the tip of your nose, pretend you don't see it as long as it doesn't eat you. Roger that. Liang Lu hung up the call in a straightforward and efficient manner. He curled his lips and indicated for Luonan to drive the specialized maintenance vehicle. The vehicle ran straight through the middle of the area labeled as low-intensity pollution. As for the alarms that were still flashing incessantly, Seiji only needed to punch them with his fist. No, he needed to adjust the alarm level and the alarm would stop flashing. Look, on the command deck of the beehive, the stress of dispatching over the past 2 days has fried a lot of people's brains. The odds of us running into gibberish have significantly increased too. Luonan's eyebrows unconsciously twitched twice as the specialized maintenance vehicle buzzed through the polluted area as they spoke. The intricate and detailed mental senses interweaved with the deep impression of the drill manual's requirements. This was more or less a type of torture for a patient with mild obsessive-compulsive disorder. Liang Lu mentally prepared him with the tone of an experienced person. Now, don't think of the base as a base. You can close your eyes and imagine a military stronghold that was built before the world of sin and was later abandoned. Now it is completely abandoned. Only mutant species that grew up in the evil environment will occasionally pass by. That's basically what a moderately polluted area means. What we're doing now, you can just treat it as field work. Even the logistics personnel will occasionally have the opportunity to go out into the field. This is a rehearsal ahead of time. Luonan laughed and Liang Lu laughed as well. He punched the control panel of the vehicle again. Who would have thought that a problem would occur with the jade crystal array? It's all that self-righteous, wicked thing's fault. Luonan, who was given the title of Wicked Thing, had a smile that collapsed a bit. Luckily, Liang Lu didn't notice. He just sighed. Honestly speaking, our luck is far too bad. The follow-up treatment is quite troublesome after staying in this environment for too long. But it's fine. We're fully reimbursed. We don't need to worry about the cost. It was hard for Luonan to imagine the situation outside of the game setting. But through his observations during this period of time, he discovered that the citizens of Heavenly Abyss of the Hongguang system had a contradictory attitude toward the evil poison. Of course they knew that the evil poison pollution was a very troublesome matter. Otherwise, Zhang Zhao's mentality wouldn't have nearly collapsed. The early stages of the world of sin calamity also wouldn't have so many tragic cases that made people feel suffocated. But the evil poison pollution was a problem that the people of the Hongguang system had to come into contact with, face, and endure. No one lived in a vacuum, let alone a vacuum that couldn't block the pollution and infiltration of the evil poison environmental rules. Therefore, in the face of such a terrible situation, everyone in the relay station, be it the knights, the colonels, the sergeants, or the privates, all displayed a kind of calmness as though they had given up. The evil poison was truly disgusting. Well, since they had already splashed it all over their bodies, then so be it. Of course, the evil poison pollution would have repercussions and it would be very serious. There were over 10,000 soldiers in the base. Don't look at how each and every one of them was alive and kicking right now. After the war, they would have to pay a huge price for treatment. Even if the expenses were reimbursed, the treatment was bound to drag on for a long time. Variables would crop up everywhere. But so what? Everyone is forced to do so. Since the beginning of the world of sin calamity, the public version of the Empire's internal cultivation and law deployment has been updated practically every 30 years. After several hundred versions, it has long since changed beyond recognition when compared to the current one. What? Liang Lu used his chin to point at Luo Nan as he asked this question. But he didn't expect Luo Nan to answer at all. He continued speaking. Key techniques like internal cultivation and law deployment have been tempered over and over again. How many years have passed before they have accumulated their essence? They are the results of basic research done to the extreme. But how can basic research be broken through that easily? One iteration every 30 years. If one could have this kind of speed of progress, then the godly kingdom of the heavens would have to crawl on the ground and call them daddy. In the end, everyone has been living in the evil poison environment for a long time. They have been polluted and mutated by the environmental rules. They have no choice but to do this. Perhaps in a few hundred years, a few thousand years, people like us will be a completely different species from our ancestors even though we still retain our historical memories. We will be forced into a different evolutionary direction by the evil poison. Hey, did I say a bit too much? I didn't scare you, did I? Luo Nan answered honestly, not at the moment. Oh, you're that courageous? Our situation this time won't be worse than the one Captain Lu faced in the war to defend the ancestral domain back then. Liang Lu was startled for a moment, then he laughed out loud. That's the right way to think. The car slowed down on its own in the middle of his happiness. A large bionic device in the shape of an insect lay quietly within the pipeline tunnel approximately 50 meters in front of them. The 6 limbs spread out symmetrically. Each limb was as thick as an arm, but compared to the curved main cabin that was the size of a train carriage, they still appeared slender. As a result, when they propped themselves up at the bottom of the tunnel, they felt soft and powerless. Chapter 9:12. When they got closer, they were able to see that the enormous mechanical insect in front of them was nearly filled to the brim with pipelines. There were hundreds and thousands of larvae wriggling and undulating beneath its slender limbs. Some of them even flew up in the air, climbing to higher areas of the limbs. They moved in sequence and flowed ceaselessly. Oh! Liang Lu instantly exposed a few small details that contradicted his identity as an experienced person, but no one cared about this right now. The specialized maintenance vehicle continued to move forward. They got a bit closer, and the sparks that occasionally lit up between the larvae and the limbs allowed the two to see even more details. There were protrusions on top of the 6 limbs, and every protrusion was a special workstation that could accommodate 1 or 2 people. There were roughly 100 of them, but not even a tenth of them were in a working state right now. And the so-called larvae were actually all sorts of self-propelled maintenance robots. They would be driven by commands to move over if they were damaged, or if they needed to change their mounting tools. They would automatically divert between the limbs and the abdomen of this mechanical insect to complete the task of repair and replacement. TSK. The Earth Layer Patroller is a mid-sized mobile repair station. I never thought that I would actually need to use this big fellow for outdoor work. Luo Nan sized up the so-called repair station from head to toe. Its main body, excluding the limbs, was approximately 20 meters long. The widest part of its carapace-shaped body was at least 8 meters, and its height could reach approximately 6 meters. If the appearance of the limbs was taken into account, it would appear even more expansive. It looks bulky, but its structure can actually be shrunk. When it's finished, it can even use the spatial point-to-point permeation technique to warp the rock strata, allowing it to run extremely fast underground. Luo Nan couldn't help but let out a wow. He was quite fascinated. The only unfortunate thing was that this was the first time this special piece of equipment appeared, and it didn't feel particularly easy. The number of larvae under its abdomen was truly a bit too many. There were several hundred to 1,000 pieces of machinery and equipment waiting to be repaired. It would have been fine if there were 100 workstations. But there were less than 10 workstations on the 6 limbs. It was hard to avoid a bit of trouble dealing with all of them. So much so that the entire repair team became quite bloated. Just how much work has been accumulated here? No wonder they asked us to come and help. Liang Lu looked at this scene in detail. He was a bit apprehensive in his heart, but he had to put on a calm and collected appearance in front of Luonan. This is pretty good. Compared to the assembly line, this kind of position is more tempering. While they were talking, the maintenance vehicle was already approaching the tail of the soil patroller. After the signal connection was completed, a hole automatically opened in the area for the maintenance vehicle to enter and exit. However, the soil patroller's abdomen was filled with machinery waiting to be repaired, and the direction of the machinery's flow was also fixed. As the driver, Luonan switched to maglev mode under the suggestion of the AI in order to avoid interfering with the already excessively bloated queue. The body of the car floated in the air, passing over the larvae that covered the ground and gliding toward the opening. Liang Lu was still working hard to fulfill his duty as the commanding officer of the army. He stimulated Luonan's desire for victory. We can have a maintenance competition. Whoever loses will go find Zhan Xiao and get that out of print. Rumble. The sound of an explosion suddenly came. Actually, the first thing the two felt was the shock wave that directly oppressed and warped the air. It came crushing over from the side and front. So much so that they were unable to distinguish the following explosion. Was it a simple stimulation to their eardrums, or was it a vicious blow to their faces? Then their concussed brains gave off a signal of protest. Liang Lu was completely unprepared. His mind went blank and the world spun around him. If it weren't for the flexible seatbelt's automatic restraint, he would have been flung a dozen meters away by the roofless maintenance vehicle. Not just him, even the maintenance vehicle that weighed more than 2 tons had its magnetic track restraint between it and the soil patrol forcibly broken under the impact that came without any warning. The body of the vehicle was clearly offset, and under the effect of the intermittent magnetic force, it swayed in the air like a heavy leaf before it smashed into the external armor layer at the edge of the entrance. There was no telling how thick it was. In the end, Liang Lu had undergone sudden impact training. It only took him 0.02 of a second to 3 breaths of time before he was jolted awake by the dual warnings from himself and the 2 AI in the maintenance vehicle. He didn't even have time to warn Luonan. He directly used his authority as a commanding officer to take back control of the maintenance vehicle and perform manual emergency evasion. But he was actually unable to take it back. Determination passed. Magnetic track correction complete. Preparing for collision. Motherf asterisk cur. Liang Lu couldn't hold back from cursing. His final chance to adjust had already passed by the time his curses left his mouth. The flexible seatbelt had already bound him firmly to his seat, and the maintenance vehicle he was riding in had turned into a card that was flung out diagonally. It spun, scraped the edge of the metal at the edge of the entrance and smashed into it with a whoosh. First, there was a clear clang sound of impact. It seemed to have been caught somewhere, and the entire body of the train flipped sideways. Before it had completely flipped over, the strong magnetic restraint gathered again, and the train made a surfing-like roll and returned to its original position. Then Liang Lu saw and experienced it. The maintenance vehicle smashed into the magnetic restraint ring. It was like a crazed beast that had been shot with a tranquilizer gun. It smashed forward in the narrow passageway. It smashed into the left wall, smashed into the right wall, smashed into the ceiling, and smashed into the floor. After 7 or 8 consecutive smashes, it finally digested the inertial force and came to a stop in disorder. Rumble. Another muffled sonic boom rang in his ears. The vehicle and his body bounced once more. Liang Lu subconsciously curled up his body into a defensive position before he came to a realization. This time the entire Earth Layer patroller was rocking. The second sonic boom was the same as the shock wave that nearly caused the car accident. It was just that they had entered the stomach of the Earth Layer patroller. There was an additional layer of filtering buffer, so it wasn't that uncomfortable. This was. The fantasy breed servant army outside had begun a large-scale attack. They had really made it at the right time. Liang Lu finally came to his senses. He turned his head to look. Luonan, are you okay? Luonan was also firmly tied to his seat, but his hands were still propped up against the driver's seat sensor area. His arms were a bit stiff. Liang Lu was worried that his defensive posture wasn't in place and that his bones would be broken by the collision from the tumbling just now. I'm fine. Luonan's voice was still stable. His hands moved away from the sensor area, and at the same time, the two's flexible seatbelts automatically loosened, restoring their freedom. Liang Lu let out a long sigh. His scalp tightened. In that situation just now, if they really collided, it wouldn't be fatal. However, they would injure their muscles and bones, and they would be sent to the battlefield hospital. If this was the result of their first new mission, they wouldn't be able to raise their faces before the end of this battle. Liang Lu remembered something else when he thought of this. He pulled up the operation records of the special maintenance vehicle without a second thought. Even so, it was more daunting than dangerous, but he just couldn't understand why he didn't take back the control authority when he used his commanding officer authority. The last operation. Luonan? Yes, Gongshi? Luonan responded. Liang Lu looked at the confused expression of his only subordinate soldier. His own mind was even more confused. What kind of operation is this? He saw that. No, that set of records showed that Luonan had promptly switched to manual mode the instant the special maintenance vehicle was detached from the magnetic track. He completed as many as 22 operations within 1,000th of a second. He forcefully completed the manual docking of the vehicle and the magnetic track, as well as the trajectory adjustment. It was this series of operations that helped the AI complete the most critical judgment of the situation. It allowed everything to return to the right track. Liang Lu only reacted in the latter half of this time frame. He attempted to take over the authority, but the AI had already determined the correctness of the previous set of operations. It gave Luonan more weight in the operations, and this caused Liang Lu's control to become ineffective. Basically, there were no mistakes in the logic. But how did Luonan enter and execute the 22 operation commands in the blink of an eye? Just how fast did his consciousness rotate in that instant? The operation records were drawn, right? Luonan looked at the records and was a bit baffled. I didn't do that much. Someone followed up just as the conversation began. What kind of operation? To put it nicely, it's an extreme operation. But to put it bluntly, it's an operation that scrapes the edge. It's an operation that's just a hair away from violating the rules. The answer to Liang Lu's doubt was a hoarse voice that suddenly appeared, sounding a little weak. The two people in the car looked in the direction of the voice. This was already the end of the passageway. It just so happened to be a parking area. Two similar maintenance vehicles were parked there, as well as some other means of transportation, but no one could be seen. Liang Lu and Luonan didn't dare to tarry. They happened to jump out of the car at the same time by chance. They stood ramrod straight and announced in a loud voice, "Second-rank public officer Liang Lu, Private Luonan, has come under orders to report." It was still the same hoarse voice. He spoke powerlessly. "You can see it. I'm your direct subordinate officer, Go Yi. If you have the time to talk nonsense, come over and help your officer up." Huh. The two looked at each other in dismay. Luonan's reaction was a bit faster. His line of sight shifted and he saw a shadow that didn't quite fit in between the two parked maintenance vehicles. After confirming the suspicious range, they focused their analysis. The two went, "Oh no," and ran forward together. They tried to lift up the person who was sandwiched between the two vehicles. But Luonan was stupefied when he just touched the edge. The current situation of this Lieutenant Go Yi really wasn't suitable for many people to use their strength. This was because this person's limbs were all severed from the shoulder to the hip. Moreover, he didn't have prosthetics installed. He had the appearance of a severe disability that was completely unable to take care of himself. Liang Lu was still able to recognize this person. He called out, "Lieutenant Go," once more and carefully lifted him up, placing him on the side of the car. "You've never seen a disabled person before, huh? Then do you know that this disabled person just helped you out?" Lieutenant Go Yi was clearly already used to Luonan's current gaze. He had an indifferent expression, still full of the air of an officer. "If I wasn't here, I wouldn't have used my only leg to adjust the magnetic orbit. You, Private Luonan, would have had to perform at least 50 instantaneous operations. That would be a completely illegal act of mental interference. I could immediately kick you back to Tu Hive." Chapter 9:13. What could Luonan say? He could only straighten his body and respond in a loud voice. Liang Lu, who was still supporting Go Yi, opened his mouth in an attempt to plead leniency for Luonan. But before he could speak, Go Ye's round face, which didn't have much dignity to it, turned around. His lips curled into a sneer. "And you? Operational records? You still have the face to look at operational records, huh? Large amounts of instantaneous operational records that defied common sense. You should immediately think of the mutual interference that directly acted upon the configuration frame of the equipment. But you're still confused even now. Is he the commanding officer, or is he the corpse collection squad? There was nothing to say. Liang Lu and Luo Nan could only raise their voices a second time. Yes, Captain. Just a few words back and forth, another wave of shock came, and the roaring sound suppressed the voices of Luo and Liang. As for Go Yi, his butt hung on the edge of the maintenance vehicle. He swayed back and forth. He really couldn't gather his breath. In the end he could only glare at Luo Nan. My leg. Ah. Yes. Luo Nan could still be saved. He turned his head and searched by relying on Go Ye's explanation. Soon he found the target that was tossed near the emergency control console at the entrance of the magnetic tracks. He jogged to a distance of 7 or 8 meters and picked up the leg prosthesis. There was even a pair of military pants hanging outside. During this time, Go Yi raised his eyebrows and asked Liang Lu for confirmation. Fish egg? Liang Lu grinned. It could be considered an apologetic smile, but in the end he still answered very seriously. Naturalized seed. Outstanding talent. Stable operation. 0 mistakes to this day. Regular operation is very stable. But once you exceed the scope and need to display your abilities freely, the nature of the fish egg will be exposed. Go Yi watched Luo Nan return and declined Luo Nan's offer to help install the prosthesis. His smooth and round body dropped down and the suction cup on his left hip latched onto the prosthesis. In this way this person had become a left leg prosthesis. He could move freely. He was a disabled person. Luo Nan was a bit curious. After all, there were far too few people in a situation like Go Ye's in the front line zone of the relay station. Captain Go Yi didn't care about these gazes, but he was unwilling to stay here any longer. Let's go. It's better to talk about some things inside. As he spoke, he took the lead in moving his single-legged prosthesis. The exposed bionic toe joints were like 2 short legs, driving the entire body forward at a speed that normal people couldn't reach. It was fast and steady as if he was gliding along the ground. It was fine to look at the overall situation, but it was rather comical to look at it in detail. However, what Luo Nan saw was how Lieutenant Go Yi utilized the prosthetic structure to complete functions that were absolutely impossible to preset. To put it bluntly, this was also an example of spiritual interference with the mechanical configuration. It was just that Lieutenant Go Yi had used the dynamo core to guide him from start to finish, completely adhering to the operating specifications. Perhaps this was a state of doing as one pleases without breaking the rules. Luo Nan watched with rapt attention, so much so that Liang Lu was afraid that Luo Nan would be rude. Liang Lu poked Luo Nan in the dark to serve as a reminder. It was as if Go Yi had eyes in the back of his head. He went, "Hey, at this time, no need to make a fuss about nothing. I'm just an unlucky bastard who got screwed over by a certain long-range designer. Actually, I'm quite mighty normally, but the dozen or so multifunctional arms I use have all developed contamination deviations. All of them have been melted down. If this wasn't the case, I wouldn't be guarding this bug as a supervisor. I'd be on the production line this morning." Liang Lu glared at Luo Nan, and Luo Nan lowered his head in apology. Go Yi turned his head. "But you? Luo Nan, right?" "Yes, Lieutenant. I see that you don't have any misgivings with your interference configuration framework. It looks like you've been doing design for a long time. You're not the same as this miscellaneous trash next to you. Why didn't you stay in the 2 hive and make use of your talents?" Luo Nan was quite happy to receive such an evaluation from Lieutenant Go Yi, who had quite the professional air about him. But he didn't know why, so he could only look at Liang Lu. Liang Lu was quite dissatisfied with the evaluation of miscellaneous trash. But Lieutenant Go Yi wasn't like xianxia or Lu Andy, who he was familiar with. Within the military system, where ranks were clearly distinguished, Liang Lu could only listen. He received Luo Nan's pleading gaze, so he spoke honestly, reporting to Lieutenant. "We are the recruit squad. According to the latest requirements, we have all been transferred to the frontline maintenance department." Frontline? What kind of frontline is this? However, recruits really should see the world. Otherwise, they won't be unable to differentiate frontline from second line. Go Yi laughed out loud. Right now, the 3 of them had already followed the internal passageway and entered the central control room of the Earth Layer Patroller. The equipment here was densely arranged and the space was extremely narrow. It was so small that it was almost stingy. Clearly, the Earth Layer Patroller had quite a bit of space to use. Go Yi saw Luo Nan's doubts and took the initiative to explain. "This is for the sake of shrinking and escaping in a state of emergency. I'll give you guys a word of advice first. Instead, it is about solving practical, life-threatening problems. Right now, the repair team has a full complement of 20 people. There are only 11 people here on the big bug's side, including you two. The other 9 people are going to deal with emergency situations according to the needs of the front lines. While I'm speaking, there might be some unlucky bastard who directly faces the assault of a fantasy breed and his servant army. He might even be dead by now. Luo Nan and Liang Lu glanced at each other. They were both speechless. Lieutenant Go Ye's mouth really had no taboo. He didn't care what the two rookies thought. He directly brought up the structural diagram of the Earth Layer Patroller, indicating for the two to see and remember it clearly. We're currently short on manpower. We have a full complement of 84 classified workstations. Only 8 have been activated. The flow isn't too smooth. You two must take up your responsibilities as soon as possible. Station 4, I'm talking about this appendage, the lower workstation 4 to 92, it's yours. I can give you half an hour to get used to it. Seeing Lieutenant Go Ye's assignment, Liang Lu blurted out, the two of us will share a workstation. Lieutenant Go Ye confirmed as if it was a matter of course, the two of you will share a workstation. Isn't there a shortage of manpower? Strictly speaking, recruits aren't part of the manpower list before they are proven to be useful. Don't worry. I won't give you two a test to take charge of an area for now. Liang Lu's eyes went wide. But we... Lieutenant Go Ye twisted his face to look at him. Officer Liang Lu, the lowest rank in every workstation right now is Sergeant Major. Who gave you the courage to compare yourself with them before you've even entered the post? Yes, Lieutenant. Liang Lu's voice quickly weakened. Lieutenant Go Ye didn't seem to be truly angry. His tone didn't change at all. If nothing unexpected happens, we'll be traveling the entire base on the back of this big bug. But since this is a battlefield, accidents are normal. As I said just now, there may be people going on missions at any time. There may also be people dying. You two must have the ability to take charge of a workstation by yourself during this period of time. The faster the better. Of course, it's best if you possess the ability to take charge of an area. If there really is trouble, you two will be needed. Don't say stupid things like, I'll fight with my life on the line. What the frontline soldiers need are solid equipment, reliable pipelines and thick armor. These are achieved by relying on solid technology and abundant logistical supplies. Without these, no one would care even if you stuffed your own flesh and blood inside. No matter what Liang Lu and Luo Nan were thinking in their hearts, they were good soldiers who unconditionally carried out orders on the surface. They puffed out their chests at the same time, and it was unknown how many times they made the standard response, Yes, Lieutenant. Go Ye turned around. He placed one foot on the ground and his butt leaned against the control panel. He used this strange and unruly posture to face the two rookies. That's all. You two can go to your workstations. Alright, the damaged magnetic track and the repair vehicle are all your jobs. Don't forget to fix them before you start work. Chapter 9:14. Beep. Activity Source 6 to 23 is diverted. Egg Host B Comprehensive Repair Station 1. Mother-child type. Requesting replenishment of the liquid metal mechanical model and the original chip. Also requesting replacement of the internal factory module. Luo Nan twisted his neck. The soundproof earmuffs automatically turned on the response switch. Lower workstation 4 to 92 received. Spare parts for the liquid metal mechanical model and the internal factory module. Requesting 2 base numbers of the original chip. Received. Automatically updating the data of the spare parts requested. Request approved. The spare parts have entered the cargo corridor. Luo Nan didn't waste any time in communicating with the AI. He continued to bury his head in researching the work in his hands. 30 syncopators were like 30 flying ants. They surrounded the component clamped in his hands, moving up and down as they shuttled back and forth. The visible trajectory and the invisible but even more rigorous and beautiful configuration contours converged in the void. Luo Nan was in the middle of earnestly observing and understanding when he was jabbed in the shoulder. His train of thought was nearly interrupted. He raised his head and saw Liang Lu at the side. Liang Lu extended his hand to indicate for him to look at the flickering light and shadow icon on the transparent isolation cover in front of the workstation. The current Luo Nan couldn't be mentioned in the same breath as when he muddle-headedly participated in the offline test. He soon found his target from the dazzling visual data. Spare parts loss rate, 4%. Spare parts application rate, 100%. Spare parts module usage, 77 base numbers. Spare parts reuse rate, 31%. Lower workstation ranking, 1. Luonan went, oh. He understood Liang Lu's meaning. This meant that their group of workstations was ranked first among the 3 lower workstations out of the 8 workstations that the Soil Patrol was currently working at, based on their total work volume, work quality, work efficiency, sustainability, and other factors. Worthy of praise. Continue to work hard. Luonan grinned, accepting the encouragement from his superior. Then he lowered his head once more and continued with his previous work. Luonan's consciousness worked, and the configuration design of the handheld component gradually appeared within the notebook space of the auxiliary AI. It also appeared in the virtual work area in front of him. It was compared with the original data in the base's database. Luonan paid attention to the real thing aside from comparing the data. It wasn't just the one in his hand, but also the workstation he was at. A new disassembled component appeared. That's right. The 6 limbs that the Soil Patroller extended were not just to arrange the workstations. At the very end and at the very bottom was an automatic maintenance node. When the self-propelled equipment that needed to be repaired gathered here, some of the common and relatively simple faults were directly solved at the automatic maintenance node. If the system determined that it could not be repaired automatically, it would be handed over to the various workstations for disposal. In addition to this, there was another situation. Some equipment that had been determined to have no value to repair would be dismantled at the automatic maintenance node. The enormous noise that forced Luonan to wear his soundproof earmuffs came from this. Under the intervention of artificial intelligence, the automatic maintenance node would retain the reusable components, reclassify, refurbish, and transport them to the parts warehouse of each workstation for second use. Just now, Liang Lu had pointed out a series of statistics in this area. Such a setup could greatly improve the sustainable utilization of equipment resources. It was even more valuable in field operations. It was just that Luonan wasn't interested in the work of reusing parts. It was the same even if his workstation's relevant data was among the best. All he cared about was how to restore the configuration design to the greatest extent possible in a specific system for a specific component. So he didn't hesitate to expend his mental energy to restore the configuration design of all the parts, facilities, and equipment that had passed through his hands. This was to gain a deeper understanding of the overall train of thought and considerations of the product designer. He traced back to the source and sought for a thorough understanding. For a maintenance personnel, engaging in this sort of reconstruction research was a waste of time under the premise that they already possessed detailed basic information. But who asked Luonan's 2-person workstation to be in such a special situation? Poof. Luonan was once again called out by his superior. It was a bit strange. Wasn't it Liang Lu's working time right now? The host Egg B was the most common and highly modular self-propelled comprehensive repair station. They had already repaired no less than 40 of them in the past few days. Aside from the first few that needed to be gnawed on because they weren't too familiar with the situation, they should have been repaired with their eyes closed. He asked through the communications device of his soundproof earmuffs, "Officer, is there a problem?" Liang Lu didn't respond. Instead, he straightened his back in his seat a second ago. He used an incomparably proper posture to speak loudly. In his nervousness and haste, he actually forgot to turn on his communications device. Of course, Luonan couldn't hear a thing. But Luonan wasn't an idiot. How could he not understand what was going on when he saw Liang Lu's posture? He immediately gave up on the wasteful activity in his hands and turned off the soundproof function of his earmuffs. He sat up straight like Liang Lu and reported amidst the deafening rumbling and vibrations of the outside world, "Hello, Lieutenant." The current Luonan was becoming more and more like a native of the Hongguang galaxy. He was already used to restraining his mental senses to avoid being exposed to the polluted environment. But because of this he became sluggish. He didn't even notice that someone had walked up behind him. Oh, Liang Lu said that the military had a few sensing methods built upon the foundation of using the dynamo core. Though they weren't as comprehensive and specific as mental senses, they were extremely sharp and incisive. He had to learn them no matter what. Luonan entered a state of introspection and was a bit distracted. Fortunately, Lieutenant Go Yi, who had suddenly arrived between the two of them. He just looked at the visual data on the isolation barrier. He didn't mind their attitude and reactions. Liang Lu tilted his head slightly and winked at Luonan. Then he directly threw himself into the work of repairs that was in full swing. The workstation was like a battlefield. Even if the hierarchy was strict, unnecessary etiquette could be dispensed with in a working state. So Liang Lu was confident and in the right when he threw the blame to Lieutenant Go Yi. As for Luonan, who was unfortunately in an idle state, He needed to face Lieutenant Go Ye's interrogation during his post-patrol. Go Ye still had the image of a cripple who supported himself with one leg. It would be very hard for him to complete the overly complex operations if he were to personally do the work. But his considerable standard and abundant experience in the professional field allowed him to possess the qualifications and ability to instruct all the maintenance soldiers on the Earth Layer Patroller. 77 base units. Based on the calculation of 20 equipment for each base unit, your efficiency these past 2 days is pretty good. Luonan had forcefully translated the unit of time in the Heavenly Yuan Empire into the level of day. It was only about 14 hours. 2 days was about 28 hours. Luonan had handled 1,500 pieces of equipment during this time, and his success rate was considerable. With this foundation, Luonan accepted Go Ye's evaluation with a clear conscience. Thank you, Lieutenant. Yesterday at this time, the spare parts recycling rate on your workstations was only 7%. Now it has already soared to over 30%. You're living quite frugally. Have you considered the failure rate? Chapter 9:15. Luonan really hadn't considered it. He used the syncopator to analyze the configuration, and then dissected the design using the idea of configuration design. Then he saw where he could use it. Of course he used it immediately. As for the follow-up, he didn't think too much about it. Besides, didn't they all pass the systems inspection? Is there a law that prohibits me from doing that? Luonan was a bit confused. However, Go Ye didn't criticize him either. He only moved forward a short distance, and the only available mechanical prosthesis was connected to the control panel of the workstation. With great familiarity, he brought up a series of data, which was the tracking information of all the equipment that had undergone repair procedures at this workstation. This kind of high-level data was still an important judgment basis for the merit evaluation of maintenance positions. Luonan didn't have the authority to retrieve it, so he never understood it. He was somewhat curious and took the opportunity to satisfy his curiosity. However, the efficiency of his naked eyes compared to Go Ye's reading speed with the dynamo core was worlds apart. Go Ye finished reading hundreds of thousands of pieces of information in the span of a breath. Soon, the basic data interface disappeared. Go Ye mumbled a few keywords. Self-handling missions, not bad. Battle loss rate, meaningless. Second failure rate 1%. Average. Not bad. As Go Ye's mouth opened and closed, a portion of the key data visualized chart structure appeared within the isolation barrier. He had already done a certain degree of data analysis during this time, allowing the work results of Luonan and Liang Lu's workstations to appear more clearly. What should be done has been done. What should be done has been done. What should be done has been done. He's completely following the drill manual. What a good child. Luonan didn't know whether Go Ye's words were compliments or insults. He would just treat it as a compliment for the time being. At this moment, Liang Lu had already completed the rapid repair of the ovipositor B's comprehensive repair station. Usually, at this stage, the artificial intelligence would quickly assign new tasks and would never let a workstation be idle for too long. But wasn't Go Ye here? He issued an order at the right time. Liang Lu and Luonan's virtual world, as well as the isolation barrier, displayed a pause icon. The two rookies turned their heads, confused as to what Go Ye was going to do. Go Ye's round face was full of smiles, and he didn't look like an officer at all. If he still had his prosthetics, he would probably be smiling and stroking the two dogs' heads to show his love. You've been working for 2 consecutive days without making any obvious mistakes. Very good. However, I can't be arrogant and complacent. I still need to recharge myself in time. It's time to study now. Learn what? Captain, are you going to give us some pointers? Luonan's train of thought was simple, but Liang Lu's thought was a layer deeper. Though he had irresponsibly thrown Go Ye to Luonan to deal with, this didn't mean that he didn't respect Go Ye. On the contrary, if this experienced maintenance veteran who was praised by even a colonel, was willing to guide them, he would definitely be more than happy to do so. However, Go Ye chuckled and shook his head in denial. You've been working so hard without sleep and rest. The level of your studies can definitely be raised a little more. This is the training video for the promotion of colonels. Promoted to a major? Training? Aha, an analysis of the current situation and the direction of the logistics work in the near future. Liang Lu was startled when he heard that, then he came to his senses. His pretty face was filled with excitement. It's our turn? You mean the Jade Crystal Formation? Go Ye glanced at him. Don't make wild guesses. Won't you know when you learn? Understood. Liang Lu's voice was loud and clear, no matter what Go Ye said. In other words, he had a 99% certainty. Actually, Liang Lu, Zhan Xiao, and Lu Andy, these professionals with considerable attainments in the field of configuration knowledge, had already guessed the core of this unforeseen event when the two knights and Colonel Xingzhan arrived at the scene of the contamination. All of the reactions done by the relay station were related to this core, whether overt or covert. In fact, mid-level officers like Zhan Xiao had already participated in the relevant training. The decision-makers of the relay station didn't have any intentions of deliberately hiding the crisis. However, this matter was quite specialized. Not everyone could understand it smoothly. Plus, it was wartime right now. Every soldier in the relay station had a mission. It was impossible for them to all go off-post for training. They could only take turns. And Colonel Xingzhan was a famous busy man. In the end, he could only use this sort of compromise method. From top to bottom, from key departments to peripheral positions, from directly related personnel to unrelated personnel, they were trained in sequence. Rookies like Luo Nan and Liang Lu were able to get their turn at this stage mainly by relying on the position bonuses of the maintenance personnel of the logistics department. Go Yi saw that Liang Lu and Luo Nan weren't ignorant people, so he didn't feel like saying anything more. He indicated to them that they could go. Liang Lu didn't say anything further as he began to organize the workstations. He even indicated to Luo Nan to keep up with the pace and not waste time. Luo Nan obviously listened to his commanding officer. However, the true commanding officer changed his mind at the last moment just as he took off his soundproof earmuffs. Hold on. Since you guys are in this state, then you might as well take turns. You guys can rest, but you can't. That's pretty good. Ha! Liang Lu and Luo Nan were startled at first, then delighted. Go Ye's words were clearly correcting his earlier arrangement of having the two of them squeeze into the same workstation. It was tantamount to recognizing their ability to work independently. Yes, Lieutenant. Liang Lu and Luo Nan spoke at the same time. Liang Lu even clenched his fists in secret, cheering for the sake of quickly justifying himself. Liang Lu had Luo Nan go listen to the lecture first. He was quite interested in Colonel Xingzhan's training course. Luo Nan was very interested in Colonel Xingzhan's training course, but he really didn't want to move right now. He shook his head and said, "I feel pretty good during this period of time. I'll stay a bit longer. Call me later." The emotional state of a technician was the one that was completely unreasonable. Liang Lu knew how much Luo Nan cared before. It didn't seem like Luo Nan was simply giving way out of courtesy. He thought for a bit and didn't press the issue any further. "Then I'll make some notes first. You can refer to them later." Okay. The two reached an agreement. Liang Lu jumped up and saluted Go Yi. He hurried out of the workstation and rushed to the training room. The pause icon of the isolation cover disappeared at nearly the same time. A new round of tasks had arrived. The advantage of the two workstations was completely lost as soon as Liang Lu left. A single workstation had to repair 1,500 pieces of equipment within 30 hours. Such a flow rate was no longer able to allow Luo Nan to calmly split and reconstruct. He quickly entered a working state to deal with the equipment queues that flowed over one after another. The vast majority of maintenance tasks at the lower workstations were those that were hard to handle with the automatic maintenance process, but they were relatively low-end problems. Luo Nan didn't need to use too much of his brain. He just needed to make accurate judgments, choose the appropriate materials, and act fast. It was because of this that Luo Nan would subconsciously use the syncopator to cut the more special equipment problems the moment he bumped into them during such a busy time. Luo Nan might not have the time to ponder deeply, but he would always encounter similar situations no matter how special this sort of large flow and highly repetitive task flow was. He couldn't see through it the first time. He couldn't see through it the second time. He couldn't see through it the third or fifth time. He wouldn't miss it. Whenever there was a gap of a dozen or 20 seconds between two maintenance tasks, Luo Nan would quickly organize and record these small gains. Through this method, Luo Nan quickly absorbed the mature and complete configuration design results of the Heavenly Yuan Empire. He endlessly enriched his own knowledge base. He didn't feel bored at all, he just enjoyed it. The feeling is really good. Your foundation is quite solid. Your condition is even rarer. For the 100-year sequence to produce such a talent, the Department of Science and Education should treat you as a model. They should be bragging about you. Luo Nan's heartbeat sped up in an instant from the soundproof earmuffs. Only now did he realize that Go Yi hadn't left yet. He had been observing from behind all this time. Speaking of which, this could already be considered interfering with his work. Lieutenant Go Yi didn't seem to be aware of this. He continued to evaluate Luo Nan. "Your hobbies are out of the ordinary. Many people know that the syncopator is useful, but it's rare to see someone use it as frequently as you do. However, there's something I don't quite understand. If you trained in this solid foundation in the general knowledge course of the 100-year sequence, then even if you've never come into contact with military equipment before, there should be quite a high rate of mechanical configuration designs and related civilian products. Is there a need to carry treasures back to your home to take notes one by one, to proofread them all over again? Luonan's hands didn't stop working, but his mind was a bit muddled. He didn't know how to respond. Was he supposed to say that he had gone through the most basic of learning and practice in a sandstorm filled with spacetime configuration fragments? At the same time, he relied purely on self-study. He hadn't received any formal foundational education in configuration? Speaking of which, what in the world was the Innerverse simulator doing? How could it allow a gamer to fall into such an awkward and sensitive situation? Lieutenant Go Yi blew on the syncopator while Luonan was crazily ridiculing in his mind. The syncopator, which Luonan had been controlling, suddenly deviated from its original trajectory. It spun and spun on the control panel. Or is it that you didn't learn mechanical configuration design in school? You walked the path of bionics or genetic layouts. Actually, I studied spacetime design. Luonan thought about these words, but he didn't say them. In the end, he could only respond vaguely, I just learned blindly. And at this time he shouted loudly in his mind, hurry up and show yourself, simulator of the Innerverse. He didn't know if the simulator had shown itself, but Lieutenant Go Yi really did laugh at this moment. Alright, that's a possibility. However, speaking of the syncopator, this little thing is a mechanical creation, but the source isn't that solid. The credit of the School of Fantasy is a bit bigger. It's said that it's an accessory to the School of Fantasy's research on the alien species. The School of Fantasy? Luonan wasn't too clear on this concept, but it wasn't good for him to ask. He just listened to Go Yi speak. The syncopator is very different from the School of Creation in their hands. It's gaudy, but it's especially capable. It can even simulate a senior lord-level alien species and a fantasy species. Later on, they had to simulate the nefarious poison revolution. In the end, they flipped many times, suffering disastrous casualties. The golden age of the mental side has already passed. The domain of configuration doesn't have a solid material foundation. It's far too easy for problems to arise. The School of Fantasy has declined because of this. Legend has it that the perpetual configurations that are active in the depths of the Sky Abyss Spirit Network, capable of imprisoning and taming fantasy breeds, have been annihilated one by one. Chapter 9:16. Hey Lieutenant Go, you're still here? 40 minutes later, Liang Lu finished his training and came back. He was quite surprised to see Go Yi still at his workstation. He thought that he had figured it out and defended Luonan. Lieutenant, Luonan's mind is very clear. His hands are very steady. There's absolutely no problem even if he's here alone. Yes, there's no problem. Lieutenant Go Yi casually admitted. He watched as Luonan completed yet another maintenance mission. Then he used this time to clarify his statement. It's because there's no problem that he can't be here. Since you can work independently, your workstations must be separated for the sake of efficiency. It just so happens that Sergeant Xianxia has gone to the front lines to deal with an accident. A few workstations have been adjusted, and 1 to 95 is empty. Luonan will fill in. Let's see how it goes. Luonan will definitely be fine. Liang Lu answered happily. Then he suddenly froze. Go to Station 1? That's quite far. Go Yi laughed. How big is this bug? Liang Lu knew that this had nothing to do with size. According to the current work intensity, the two might not see each other for the next 8 to 10 days if they were to be separated on the same Earth layer patroller. Working independently. Working independently. Speaking of independence, the only soldier he could control was the one who was given independence. He was a bit stunned. He thought of something and said, This? Luonan is my soldier. Yeah, you brought him. Go Yi looked at him with a smile. Do you have any objections to this deployment? How could Liang Lu dare to have any objections? Plus, for a rookie like Luonan, being able to work independently was undoubtedly the most important affirmation, aside from a promotion and a promotion. He was just a bit awkward. As the highest person in charge of this Earth layer patroller, Go Yi didn't care what Liang Lu was thinking. He confirmed the time and spoke to Luonan. You have 1 minute to pack your personal belongings. Then go to the military classroom to look at the radiographic films. Come to workstation 1 to 84 before 9 o'clock today and start working. Your work data from 4 to 92 will be automatically merged into the past. If you have any objections to the data merging results and basis, you too can apply for a review after the end of this mission. No problems, right? Liang Lu and Luo Nan immediately responded. No problems. Go Yiyang raised his eyebrows and didn't say anything else. Substitution technique, carried his figure backward and entered the elevator tunnel. He didn't know where he went. There were only 2 people left at the workstation. Luo Nan and Liang Lu looked at each other in dismay. Probably because Lieutenant Go Yi had taken care of the adaptability of the workstations, no new missions were assigned during this period of time. This gave the 2 of them some time to talk. I only wanted to work on my own. I didn't expect to be sent so far away. Liang Lu was a bit vexed. He trusted Luo Nan's professional talent and skills quite a bit. It was just that Luo Nan's abnormal way of thinking about sacrificing common sense that made Liang Lu a bit worried. He unconsciously scratched his head and asked in a puzzled and troubled manner, "What did Lieutenant Go say to you just now?" Luo Nan began to tidy up his personal belongings. Actually, there wasn't much to tidy up. At most, he just needed to organize his data files so that they could be seamlessly connected to his new workstation. He did not hide anything from Liang Lu, and there was no need for him to do so. Lieutenant Go introduced me to a technique called fantasy mimicry. This was an answer that Liang Lu had not expected. What mimicry? Fantasy mimicry. It said that it's one of the supporting technologies when the School of Fantasy invented the syncopation apparatus. It's just that it's undergone a few improvements now. Luo Nan recalled the conversation just now and roughly summarized. It's a technique that uses the syncopation apparatus as a tool and utilizes a specific bionic configuration to guide and utilize mental abilities. It can bestow additional functions to the target similar to a blessing. Lieutenant Go feels that I'm quite suited to learn this method. Liang Lu's eyes went wide. He wants to teach you. He copied a learning program for me earlier. He told me to study it by myself when I had the time. If I didn't understand anything, I could ask him. He harbors evil intentions. Ha! Liang Lu gestured excitedly. You still can't tell? He wants to poach you. He's giving you benefits and he's hanging you. He wants you to work under him. Aren't we working under him? Oh. Liang Lu choked for a moment. His brain circuits were a bit off. A new mission was finally assigned at this time. The AI beeped and Liang Lu had no choice but to split some of his energy to handle the work on hand. But he was still unwilling in his heart. He seized every second to speak to Luo Nan. Don't forget that it was Lieutenant Commander Xingjian who arranged for me to lead you. You must let the Lieutenant Commander know of this matter. Listen to his opinion. Okay. Luo Nan could roughly see the subtle psychology of the young officer before him. He felt that it was a bit comical, but the feeling of being cared for was pretty good. He laughed in response and said, I asked Lieutenant Go about this mimicry technique. He said that you can learn it as well. So I made an extra copy of the learning program. I just sent it to you. Liang Lu went, oh my. He nearly made a mistake with his hands. When he turned his head in the midst of being busy, he just happened to see Luo Nan give him a salute. Luo Nan retreated into the elevator passageway. Then the door closed and his line of sight was cut off. Liang Lu stomped his foot. He didn't care if Luo Nan could hear him or not. He shouted loudly, I've also sent you the important notes for the Lieutenant Commander Xingjian training class. The echoes of his shout buzzed within the closed workstation space. Then it was drowned out by an even more intense clamor. The 5th round of the 1st Army's classroom training class will begin in 10 breaths of time. Participants, please report promptly. If there are special circumstances, please directly request a leave of absence from Lieutenant Go Yi. Luo Nan hurriedly came out from the elevator passageway under the AI's reminder. He followed the new mission instructions and moved towards the 1st Army classroom. Though time was tight, he still glanced behind him. It was as if he could pierce through the ice-cold metal barrier and see Liang Lu. This was a character that Luo Nan already knew of even before he entered the game setting. Luo Nan grew more and more convinced that everything he experienced had once truly existed. At the very least, it was a projection and transformation of a certain reality. Let's not talk about anything else. Liang Lu was vivid and lifelike. He had flesh and blood. Whether it was the twisted expression of his emotions or the projection of his mental state, all of them possessed a solid foundation of character. Luo Nan absolutely did not believe that this was merely a fusion of millions upon millions of fragmented pieces of information. Perhaps in essence what he experienced was still a game, a dream. But the basic material that constituted this dream? He was convinced that he had touched upon the temperature of life. Luonan let out a long sigh. The immersion in the game setting had loosened a bit from this sudden feeling of emotion. But it didn't take much effort for the game setting to return to a stable state. The military classroom was just ahead. Luonan practically used the last breath of time to step inside. Then he heard the Lieutenant Commander Xingzhan's exceptionally loud and clear voice. The training has begun. Everyone, concentrate your energy. I'll first state my conclusion. The relay station has already lost its foundation of long-term defense. All work currently needs to serve the purpose of counterattack or escape. Chapter 9:17. In order to ensure a good audiovisual effect, the military classroom was very dark, and the interior was not big, at most able to accommodate about 10 people. Now it was empty. There wasn't even a seat. Luonan only saw one person when he entered. The person was sitting cross-legged on the ground in a very casual manner. There was even a medical robot beside him, buzzing around him. There was the smell of blood in the room. It was obvious that this person was injured, and the medical robot was treating his wounds. Luonan pondered. This person was probably a veteran maintenance soldier who had returned from the front lines. He had finished his mission and returned to recover from his injuries. But he still came to participate in the training. Could be said that he was extremely hard-working. Since the class had already begun, Luonan found it inappropriate to greet the wounded soldier. He walked softly and quietly to the position behind the wounded soldier and copied the wounded soldier. He sat on the ground and raised his head to watch the video. The scene at the beginning was very similar to the day when Colonel Jean had lined up a row of learning boards. They were all arranged with a lot of formulas and diagrams, the kind that could make a non-professional's head explode. Moreover, the video had been processed by technology and it was very immersive. It made people feel as if they were at the scene, and the grumpy Lieutenant Colonel Xingzhan could point at their noses and ask questions at any time. Lieutenant Colonel Xingzhan raised his voice and said, "It's meaningless to evaluate the remote designer's plan. We just need to understand what kind of environment this professional has built and how to adapt to it as soon as possible." First, the playback of the video suddenly paused. Luonan was in the middle of retrieving the class notes that Liang Lu had sent him. He was a bit stupefied when he saw the situation. He subconsciously believed that the video had malfunctioned. Right when he was about to get up and take a look at the situation, the wounded soldier in front of him turned around. "Hey kid, basic version or interactive version?" The man's back was facing the light from the video. The shadow on his face and the reflection of the metal structure intertwined, making him look quite ferocious. Such an image was a little similar to Sir Xuanhuan, whom he had met once before. However, he was relatively short and thin, and his domineering aura was far inferior. He looked more like a ruffian soldier. Purely from his senses, this person's appearance and tone did not seem to be a good person. But since the other party took the initiative to communicate, Luonan responded honestly, "Sir, I didn't know there were different versions. This is my first time." "Yes, sir." Luonan had already seen the insignia of this person's position. It was a non-commissioned officer rank. This person would certainly be able to control Luonan. This was the duty of a private soldier. The sergeant continued, "Logically speaking, you should read the basic version. It's fine as long as you know the general meaning. But I really don't want to waste my time with you. By the way, how long is your training schedule?" Luonan confirmed the current time. "I'll be at work at 9 o'clock. There's nearly an hour left." Of course, he was referring to the Heavenly Abyss unit, which was equivalent to about 80 minutes of Earth time. The sergeant was a little taken aback. "That's very lenient. Has old Go become kind? Let's watch the interactive version together. If there's anything you don't understand, you can ask. Think carefully before you ask. Don't talk nonsense, don't be long-winded, otherwise don't blame me for kicking you out." "Okay." Luonan felt that although this person had a bad mouth, he was actually quite easy to deal with. At the very least, he could take care of other people's actual circumstances. As for what the interactive version was, Luonan sought assistance from the AI and soon found out the answer. So it turned out that this training course was interactive. Its basic content was recorded for the first time when he was promoted to a field officer. It was only half an hour in length. The content of this half an hour was actually edited from Xingzhan's training course for middle and high-ranking technical officers. It was a bit too profound. Most of the non-professionals were just there to watch the show and understand the basic situation and things to take note of. But for the basic technical officers, they had to delve into it more or less. Watching it once was definitely not enough, and there was no need to repeatedly slice it frame by frame. Therefore, it was designed in an interactive format. The trainee could ask questions in the form of a message, asking specific questions in actual operations. The AI would sort it out and hand it over to Xingjian or other technical experts for an answer. Then it would be edited and processed again, realizing a second refinement and expansion of the key and difficult content, endlessly supplementing the training content. Therefore, theoretically speaking, the interactive version that the trainee watched would be different every time. And the more time passed, the richer the content would be. The more popular it would be and the more practical it would be. As time allowed, Luonan obviously wanted to watch the most valuable version. The training video continued to play. Xingjian didn't waste words and went straight to the point. First of all, the most direct effect of this structural design is to interfere with the magneto-optical mica jellyfish. It destroys the space-time environment that is highly advantageous to the opponent, rendering the energy-stealing tentacle ineffective. It protects the plane of the base's jade crystal array. Chapter 9:18. In the end, the training course wasn't an academic class. Through rigorous theory and data logic, Lieutenant Commander Xingjian explained the current difficulties faced by the relay station and their root causes. Then he began to arrange specific work. In fact, the current logistics department had already begun to shift its focus. The core of this shift was the various equipment represented by the Dynamo Core. They had already begun to undergo wartime modifications, production, replacement, and the corresponding design changes. According to Lieutenant Commander Xingjian, the various internal and external Dynamo Cores had reached 99.8% of the 11,000 soldiers in the relay station. It was more or less covered. This was also the usual atmosphere of the Heavenly Yuan Empire. The Dynamo Core was the mainstream technology that permeated every level of society. The installation and usage of various Dynamo Cores had always been high. Basically, entering society was the beginning of a series of changes in the Dynamo Core version. Not to mention in the military, where individuals didn't need to bear the cost. Young people who still had a vision for the future needed external Dynamo Cores to guarantee their combat strength under the test of blood and fire. Those who had no more potential in their personal cultivation needed internal Dynamo Cores to increase their ability level. Under these circumstances, changing the design of the Dynamo Core in order to increase the adaptability of the sinister environment was a huge project. The complex arrangements of defense lines, departments, and personnel simply made people go crazy. Everyone would be affected. Why did the two rookie recruits, Liang Lu and Luonan, have their posts pushed further and further away? It was precisely because the replacement work of the Dynamo Core and other equipment was initiated that the base adopted the strategy of trading materials for time. In any case, they didn't need to worry about the defense mission in 3 or 4 weeks. The large amount of equipment and consumables stored in the relay station were all piled up on the production line. In a short period of time, a large amount of anti-pollution self-propelled mechanical equipment was produced. The parameters of the artificial intelligence were adjusted, and the limited personnel responsible for the modification of the Dynamo Core design was given. This caused the maintenance work of an important area like the 2 hive to return to the state where the majority of the maintenance work was done by the AI system and machinery. In the current environment, the rate of equipment damage was bound to be high due to the explosive flow of mechanical soldiers. The maintenance personnel and equipment couldn't keep up, so it was simply better to build than to repair. Large amounts of personnel were stuffed into production posts. The assembly line operation formed a closed loop of production, failure, scrapping, recycling, and production. The core region of the 2 honeycombs central pipeline achieved automatic maintenance. People like Liang Lu and Luonan who had lost their posts would be chased out before they could even get on the assembly line. At present, the limited maintenance personnel had been pushed to the front line or the areas close to the front line, in order to provide more efficient logistical support for the frontline troops and the areas that had not implemented artificial intelligence maintenance before the overall equipment change was completed, so that they could be a buffer. Compared to the shift in focus of the base's defense strategy, purely technical issues were only one part of it. Of course, right now Luonan was only concerned with technical issues. A quarter of the training course for the promotion to field officer was about logic, a third was about work arrangements, and the rest was about specific technical ideas and requirements. But when it came to the technical explanation stage, Luonan's interest and his level of understanding were far from being able to reach the stage of complete encirclement. For example, the material selection and scheduling, the production line process, and the artificial intelligence content, he was like a duck listening to thunder. Only the Dynamo Core and some parts of the equipment structure were his cup of tea. Lieutenant Colonel Xingjian spoke frankly. He was not an expert in the aspect of dimensional configuration, so he could not reconstruct the fortress itself. What he could consider was the basic logical judgment of the problems that would occur with the jade crystal array of the relay station and all sorts of equipment in the new environment, as well as the corresponding configuration design, modification, and manufacturing plans. These things did not seem to have a direct relationship with the dimensional configuration design itself, but they were the most technical content on the material plane. At the very least, they were the most logical reflections of configuration. Deducing this back, it played an extremely important role in verifying the gains and losses of Luonan's examination thinking back then. It was roughly equivalent to the verification or falsification of the experimental design thinking. Luonan was unable to directly obtain an answer, but it was precisely this mode of thinking that required retroactive reasoning that formed an even sharper sublation of his previous examination thinking. Needless to say, there were countless mature and ruthless designs that were pushed out as if they cost nothing during this process. Every plan was a classic and the essence of the Heavenly Yuan Empire's tens of thousands of years of research on configuration. They corresponded to different periods, different environments, and different rules of thought on configuration design. In the training video, Lieutenant Commander Xianxia displayed the graceful bearing of a master. He casually picked and selected plans, or part of the essence or supplementary materials of the plans. All of them had the solid support of theory and data. He casually pointed out the possibilities and even the experiences of failure. All of them were the summaries of countless experiences. Luonan was practically engulfed by the knowledge that assaulted his face, as well as the happiness that followed. Only when it came to certain domains that he was not proficient in did he have the space to take a breather. If it was possible, he even hoped that this training class would continue in an endless loop. Right when he was in a wonderful state, the image in front of him suddenly froze. Luonan subconsciously let out an especially loud, "Hey!" This time he had some experience. He directly looked at the officer in front of him, and the officer just happened to turn his head. "Hey kid! You're not mute, right?" Luonan looked at him with wide eyes. He was unable to believe that the officer had severed his mental enjoyment with just a few words. The officer saw Luonan's expression and frowned. "You're really mute? Did you understand?" Luonan took a deep breath and adjusted his mood. He still answered honestly, "The configuration design part is okay, but the other parts aren't too good." "Really? The configuration design? The goal is quite clear." The officer looked at Luonan's epaulette as he spoke, confirming Luonan's rank. It was hard not to be surprised in his words. "You just entered the military not too long ago. Don't tell me I encountered a top student? Well, even if you ask me, I don't know the answer to this domain." Though this officer's face was evil, his mouth was foul, and his grasp of timing was terrible, he was still a magnanimous person. Luonan smiled at him, hoping to continue the training course as soon as possible. But the officer still asked, "Which workstation are you at?" Luonan nearly blurted out, "Are you done yet?" "No, it was 4 to 92. "Oh, that's not right." Luckily, he corrected himself in time and answered, 1 to 95. 1-95. "I remember it was xuanhuan." Luonan recalled for a moment. Lieutenant Go Yi had said this when he was assigning work. He said, "I heard that Officer Xianzhu went to the front lines on a mission, so his workstation was transferred out." "Oh my." The officer used his untreated arm to suddenly slap his thigh. Good job. Old Go really knows me." Luonan was startled. "You are?" The officer's expression suddenly changed before he could say the name. His body trembled and then he swung his arm with force. This time it was the one receiving treatment. The medical robot, which had been working diligently all this time, was overturned to the ground with a crash. Its motor was idling and beads of blood were flung out from its operating arm. There was also a small blood-colored strip. Chapter 919. Luonan could clearly see that this was a muscle fiber. Thankfully, the officer reacted quickly. Otherwise, the medical robot's debridement needle knife would have cut off an entire nerve bundle of the injured right arm. The officer, who didn't have a good temper to begin with, cursed when he suddenly received this injury. He swept his leg and kicked the idling robot far away. However, the wound had already been torn open a second time, and more blood gushed out. "Officer." Luonan displayed a bit of concern, but a portion of his attention was focused on the deeper parts of the wound. There was also the medical robot that was nearly scrapped. The emergency Model 5+ battlefield healing machine. It shouldn't have made this kind of mistake. "It's nothing." My luck is bad. It's a vicious environment right now. Anything can happen. The officer displayed a coarse and indifferent attitude. His face, which was covered by metal prosthetics, recovered his smile. I haven't even thanked you yet. You pushed me out of the fixed-point maintenance group. I don't need to play with these low-level machines every day. I can live for at least another 3 to 5 years. Luonan had already guessed this person's identity. He called out in a probing manner, Officer Xianxia? Yes, it's me. Officer Xianxia took the initiative to extend his hand. Luonan subconsciously thought that he was going to shake hands. But when he extended his hand, he discovered that Officer Xianxia was going to punch him. He hurriedly corrected himself and bumped his fingers together. Luckily, Xianxia didn't mind. In order to reduce the awkwardness, Luonan took the initiative to speak. I heard Officer Go say that you went to the front lines. I didn't expect you to come back this quickly. How far is the front lines? Besides, how is that considered the front lines? There's no close combat. There's only long-range coverage. At most, it's just gambling on luck in a casino. Xianxia's and Go Ye's explanations were surprisingly similar. Perhaps veteran soldiers who had truly been to the front lines had this kind of thinking? Luonan saw that Officer Xianxia's arm injury had clearly worsened as he spoke. The area of his injury extended from his upper right arm all the way to the back of his shoulder blade. The wound was irregular. It seemed to have been forcefully torn by a blunt object. Perhaps there was also a bone problem. In any case, the medical robot had already mended and stitched up most of the wound. It was just about to be wrapped up. Who would have expected that such a thing would happen? Plus, Luonan had a faint feeling that the problem wasn't that simple. Sir, I'll send you to the infirmary. It's meaningless. The medical module of this slime is rubbish, and it's a low-level operation in the base. It's better to use that little thing. *CK, I trusted it so much and it tricked me. Sergeant Xianxia cursed and stood up at the same time. He waved his hand to stop Luonan from helping him up. Your time as a guard is precious. You don't need to worry about me. Just watch yourself. I'll go ponder over it. As he spoke, he walked towards the medical robot that had stopped working. From his tone, it seemed like he needed to repair it again. As expected of a repairman, he couldn't bear to see the machines malfunctioning. Luonan didn't listen to Xianxia. He went straight forward and said, Officer, your current state is very bad. Nonsense, do I need you to remind me? The nails on the bones were broken and the nerves were severed. I had to forcibly reattach them. No, don't be so clingy. I hate talkative fellows the most. Sergeant Xianxia's expression changed. His rough and wild temperament clearly came out. Luonan didn't know what to say, but Xianxia seemed to have thought of something. He waved his undamaged left hand. Perfect. You're still in training. Leave 1 to 95 empty. Give me the authority. I'll go do a repair test. I'll take advantage of this time to solve the problem. It'll be the best of both worlds. Luonan thought for a bit when faced with Xianxia's oppressive gaze. He shook his head and refused. Officer, I want to say that there should be a problem with the operation of your dynamo core. Otherwise, the emergency 5+ model battlefield healing machine will only stop and stagnate. It won't cause an error in operation. Xianxia was stunned. You're going to teach me? I'm just guessing. Lieutenant Xingzhan just said that when the dynamo core's carrier is slightly contaminated, the conduction of the neural electrical signals will cause disorder in a specific waveband. This will cause deviations in the precise control. More importantly, it will activate the contamination judgment of the existing smart devices, causing a double error to superimpose. Clearly, there was a problem with the emergency 5+ model battlefield healing machine's judgment just now. Officer, you should have subconsciously made adjustments, forcefully using the dynamo core? The expression on Xianxia's fierce face was subtle. Luonan really did talk too much from his perspective, but there were some things in Luonan's words that stabbed at the pit of his stomach. In the end, it's a certain fellow's brain that's been fried. Suddenly, a hoarse voice cut in. The door to the military classroom had opened a bit earlier, and Lieutenant Go Yi glided in with the support of a single prosthetic arm. Xianxia stared at Luonan in the first instant. You're snitching? Luonan cried out in bafflement. Let's not talk about your hoarse voice. The bug is just a little big. I wouldn't even know if there was a problem with the equipment inside. I might as well throw the position of lieutenant to you. You have the nerve to say that I have a hoarse voice? Xianxia cursed vaguely. He faced Lieutenant Go Yi and made a meaningless gesture with one hand. And then, Chapter 920. Hey, what the hell are you doing? Can you have some basic trust in a newbie? The two officers and seniors cursed and chattered. Go Yi was in no hurry and Xianzhu didn't actually jump up to refuse. Luo Nan entered his proper state, minding his own business. Though Go Yi didn't speak too clearly as a maintenance worker, he was able to understand Go Ye's train of thought. In fact, this was also Xianzhu's train of thought. The other machines weren't idle. No matter what was done, it could only fall onto the malfunctioning medical robot. So Luo Nan walked over after responding. He crouched in front of the urgent 5+ battlefield healing machine that had no reaction at all. Fine granules flowed out from between his fingers. It was none other than the syncopator. This period of time was enough for Luo Nan to develop the habit of carrying a syncopator with him. He casually gave the machine on the ground a cut. Syncopator? Xianzhu's attention was drawn. He didn't care about bickering with Go Yi anymore. He grimaced in pain as he adjusted his angle on the ground. His cheek stuck to the ground as he turned his head to look. How is it? Go Yi asked. It's rare to see someone use a syncopator to make a diagnosis, and to do it so skillfully. Did I ask you? Go Yi gave him a sidelong glance. His actions successfully made Xianzhu's eyes glow with an ominous glint. But then he just bared his teeth and grunted twice. In the end, he couldn't help but raise his voice and directly ask Luo Nan, Kid, what's the result of the syncopation? Listening to Xianzhu's words felt like taking a pulse. Of course, the Heavenly Yuan Empire probably didn't have such a thing as taking a pulse, but the meaning just so happened to match. Luo Nan answered truthfully, the mounted needle knife module was struck by an external force. There is a conduction failure. It can be repaired. The central chip was probably affected by the forceful control. It has already been burned. It needs to be replaced. Go Yi clicked his tongue. Retribution? If you say you're infected, then so be it. Why the forceful control? The Urgent 5+ is equipped with a Faction 7 chip. It has 2 storage bases and has already been sent to the front lines. The replenishment hasn't arrived yet. Xianzhu sneered, do you think I'm stupid? The Urgent 5+ was bragged when it left the factory. As long as it's within the range of the Jade Crystal Array, the Cloud Core can compensate with near zero delay. As long as it senses and conducts. The system isn't completely finished. Are you sure you can't walk after burning a few broken chips? The smile on Go Yeyuan's face widened. Congratulations. You've been infected but your brain is still fine. Do you have the blueprints? I'm talking about the configuration. When it comes to long-range functions, this is very important. The last sentence was directed at Luo Nan, and Luo Nan immediately responded, yes. Perhaps Luo Nan would need to flip through the concrete details of the mechanical structure of the equipment that the Earth Layer Patroller had been in his hands for the past few days. He would need to borrow the system to filter out the plans, but the configuration designs that were separated from the physical body of the equipment were imprinted in Luo Nan's memory. He could use them at any time without any hindrance. However, Luo Nan wasn't without problems. Reporting to the lieutenant. According to the treatment data, there are 2 indicators in the state of Sergeant Xianzhu's dynamo core that have already exceeded the limits of the moderately polluted region. Moreover, it is interacting with a portion of the neurotransmitter conduction. It is not stable enough. According to the drill manual, this has already met the standards of wartime disposal. Should we? Hiss. Xianzhu sucked in a breath of cold air between his lips and teeth. On one hand, it was a reaction to Luo Nan's words. On the other hand, it was a reaction to the instantaneous change in mood. The abnormal pulsation of his nervous system formed an effect. He was speechless for a time. Go Yi was quite calm and collected. Oh, you want to mount the neurosurgery module, right? This is in stock. It will be delivered immediately. Warm up first. Try to guide the cloud core to control it from a distance. Examine it. Come up with a treatment plan first. Luo Nan obeyed Go Ye's orders. He responded with a grunt, and more syntone particles flowed down between his fingers. They switched to a working state one after another. They revolved around the paralyzed robot on the ground. Not a single one of them made any substantial contact with the robot. But after circling and adjusting a few times, it was as if several incorporeal ropes were woven in the air. The medical robot became a puppet that pulled the strings. It swayed crookedly as it adjusted its posture. It used the fine adjustments of the all-terrain tracks to stand up once more. Soon, this emergency 5+ battlefield healing machine, which was a bit like a mini armored vehicle, started its self-examination program. Its internal sensing, conduction, and external function modules all made minute adjustments amidst the soft vibrations. The miniature repair probe hidden within the belly of the machine extended out. It wrapped around the already malfunctioning needle knife-mounted mechanical arm to carry out adjustments. The needle knife mechanical arm swayed left and right. It was a bit stiff at first, but its movements became smoother and smoother after a few seconds. Xianxia switched his chin to rest on the ground. He sighed with emotion, so the 12th equipment department isn't full of big mouths after all. The cloud core compensates quite quickly. Goyi didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stared fixedly in that direction. The smile on his round face faded a bit. Chapter 921. Not to mention Goyi and Xianxia, even Luonan had trained himself to turn a deaf ear and a blind eye to similar vibrations and impacts. In the slightly shaky military classroom, Goyi only paused for a moment before continuing, "Prepare to connect to the local equipment. The treatment plan needs to be prepared first. Luonan, the situation you mentioned needs to be added into the plan. There's no need to rush the operation." "That's because you're not in a hurry." In his words there was a reversal of logic. In short, no matter who spoke he would refute. Goyi didn't care at all. "You can think of it as a symptom of your contamination. It's true that the front lines are allowed to deal with it urgently at the moment, but if it's not a situation that takes your life immediately, it's more appropriate to use specialized equipment at the back. After all, the internal growth of the dynamo core, one's life, one's future, and one's fate all depend on it. It's better to be cautious." Xianxia chuckled coldly. "As if you don't have a dynamo core." Goyi supported himself on the ground with one leg. As if performing acrobatics, he shook his limbless, bald torso. "I'm doing this to save my life. I'm fundamentally different from certain people who lack talent and confidence." Xianxia's ferocious face turned green, so much so that the metal prosthetics sank into his flesh. At this moment, Luonan practically thought that he would jump up and give the poisonous tongue Goyi a beating. But in the end, Xianxia only covered his mouth and nose on the floor and ordered in a muffled voice, "What are you waiting for? Do you think my butt is sexy?" Luonan went, "Oh," but he didn't have the awareness of being a punching bag. He responded calmly, "It's already done. According to the medical plan, it's recommended that we perform a preset signal blocking technique on the spot to prevent the nervous system from becoming chaotic and further deteriorating. Then we return to the 2 hive and perform a reset of the new dynamo core. Minor adjustments have been made to the plan for external injuries. There are basically no changes." "What do you mean by going back to the second honeycomb? Maybe they'll kick me to the assembly line." Xianxia was still using the floor to stifle his face, which corresponded to his emotions. Nothing he heard was pleasing to his ears, especially when another wave of tremors came from outside. The entire soil layer patroller was shaking more obviously, making him feel seasick as he lay on the floor. "You're not going back? Are you going to stay on the front lines and cause trouble for others?" As the superior officer, Goyi was disinclined to pay attention to this sort of emotional reaction. He turned toward Luonan. "Let's begin. You must remember this. The sinful poison contamination is a contamination of the rules. For the infected, the rules have changed." Actually, after the cloud core compensation began, the relay station would allocate a certain amount of computing resources to this machine through the network system. It was no different from when the device's chip was intact. Luonan didn't need to worry about looking after him anymore. He could be like Xianxia from before, minding his own business and participating in training and learning. No one would be able to say anything to him. However, Luonan was already used to finishing what he started on the level of configuration. Even though the work domain of the needle knife mechanical arm was quite different from what he was good at, he still hoped to be able to see a corresponding change in the configuration. In addition, according to the confirmed treatment plan, there was still a mounting module responsible for executing the signal blockage technique that hadn't come. Officer Goyi had left in a hurry just now and forgot to mention this matter. Luonan was considering whether or not he should ask again. At this time, Xianxia, who was rest-stitching the wound, began to pound the floor. "This explosive temper. Motherf asterisk her. Give me some anesthesia." Xianxia was able to laugh and talk as if nothing had happened when he directly used the knife. That was because he had used the dynamo core to block the nerve signal. Once the signal was cut off, the pain would be inconsequential. But now that the evil poison had been diagnosed, the dynamo core was as good as nothing. It had to be sealed. Xianxia was able to endure for 20 to 30 seconds without making a sound under the needle, thread, and blade. Luonan didn't know if he was a tough guy or if he was slow. "I'm sorry. I'm really sorry." Luonan promptly apologized, but what was the use of apologizing now? Luonan saw that Xianzhu's face was distorted. He needed to quickly block the transmission of pain. Drugs and the like wouldn't make it in time. In his desperation, Luonan simply waved his hand and tossed out a syncopator like scattering beans. It must be said that Luonan had a deep understanding of the structure of the human skeleton and its corresponding configuration. But when it came to specific targeted operations, Luonan was limited by his experience. He lacked experience when it came to small techniques like precise anesthesia. Luonan didn't have a choice, so he simply used the syncopator to analyze Xianzhu's current state and make adjustments. Xianzhu's forehead was covered in cold sweat from the pain. He watched as dozens of flying ants spiraled down. Some of them even stuck to his wounds. He couldn't help but be a bit stupefied. But the effects were good. He could faintly feel a bit of a unique interference force. He heard the buzzing of the flying ants and the intense pain that nearly tore his shoulder blade apart, but it was like a dream. He suddenly woke up from it and the pain disappeared without a trace. The pain and the cold sweat from the stress reaction quickly subsided, but his curiosity rose. He stirred up his tongue, which he had just bitten open, and he spoke over and over again. "Oh, this is interesting. Your hand looks familiar to me. You used the syncopator to adjust the configuration and then used reverse interference, right? No wonder Go Yi was talking about you. Don't think that just because you have the skin of a syncopator, I can't see that you're violating the rules. Luonan, you're super daring. Strictly speaking, you're very restrained. Unfortunately, it's not that you're cautious. It's more like you're forcefully controlling from start to finish." "Who taught you this?" "Lieutenant Go Yi." Luonan told the truth. "I knew it. He's the only one who studies these bizarre toys. He's a fan of the classical school. It's only because he's old and he's crippled that he's a bit quieter. His greatest joy right now is to teach you youngsters these meaningless things." Luonan frowned. He didn't want to listen to this kind of expression. He stiffly retorted, "I think it's pretty good. I like it a lot." Xianzhu heard this and turned his face to the side. He sized up Luonan from top to bottom. Then he returned to his chin resting on the floor posture. "You like it? It's good that you like it. You're much cuter than those practical types who ask if it's useful or not. I also think it's very useful." Luonan didn't get the chance to say these words before Xianzhu spoke again. "It has to be passed down. Go Yi loves to say things like this. He also says things like, 'I'm trapped in the Hongguang system right now, but I'll return to normal in the future. If I have some spare energy, I might as well do some preparatory work. I can't abandon normal things just because I'm living a shitty life right now.' And so on and so forth. He hasn't said these words to you yet? He'll have to say them sooner or later. You can recite them first. You'll give him a pleasant surprise later." Xianzhu laughed to himself. His laughter shook his chest, spreading to the wounds on his arm and shoulder. He was already anesthetized, so he didn't feel anything. However, he forced the robot to adjust the details of the operation. Only then would the robot not flip a second time. Luonan subconsciously pressed down with his hand, not letting Xianzhu move recklessly. The door to the military classroom opened once more at this time. A multifunctional. It had been modified into a transport robot. Luonan saw the special mounting module for the emergency 5+ battlefield healing machine with a single glance. With this, the signal blocking technique wouldn't be a problem. As expected, Lieutenant Go Yi was very reliable. Luonan let out a sigh of relief. He signaled the transport robot to move closer. Clang. The sudden noise didn't come from the military classroom. It came from an unknown region within the Earth Layer Patroller. Chapter 922. What the hell was going on? At this very moment, similar thoughts probably flashed through the minds of the maintenance soldiers in the Earth Patroller. However, in the military they would not explain the so-called ins and outs to you. Luonan was stupefied for half a second, but Xianzhu, who was lying on the floor, straightened his body with a whoosh the moment the command arrived. Unsurprisingly, the operation process was seriously disrupted. It was an emergency 5+ alarm. Xianzhu completely ignored it. He just urged Luonan, "Hurry, hurry, hurry. If you don't want to be a sandwich, then go to your workstation." Luonan instinctively responded with a yes, but he saw that Xianzhu was about to push away the needle-knife robotic arm. Most of the suturing operation had already been completed, and all of his previous efforts would be wasted. Luonan reacted without thinking. He shouted, "Wait," and pushed Xianzhu's hand away. Luonan didn't wait for Xianzhu to respond. He stabilized his balance on the swaying floor, bent down, and exerted strength. He picked up the 30-kilogram robot. At the same time, he extended his leg and kicked the mounted neurosurgery module that the transport robot had just delivered. It was flung towards Xianzhu. This set of operations flowed like clouds and water. It was done in one go, proving the practical value of the basic fighting techniques that Gym Master Xiao had taught Luonan. Xianzhu's eyes were glued to Luonan's series of operations. He instinctively used his undamaged arm to catch the mounted module that was still in its packaging state. Then he was urged by Luonan, "Hurry up." 1-95. Xianzhu frowned. "Rookie, have you never read the drill manual? At times like this, non-station personnel need to gather in the command room." Though he said this, he allowed Luonan to push him. The two maintained a relative distance as they jogged outside. As an experienced veteran, Xianzhu played the role of leading the way. The auxiliary AI did indeed have a direct route to the destination, but it would never tell Luonan how to find a suitable point of leverage within the bumpy and swaying Earth Layer patroller. This way, Luonan would be able to maintain a fast speed and not lose his balance. As for the medical robot in Luonan's arms, it was worthy of being the most trusted emergency treatment tool of the Sky Abyss military for the past several decades. After a few seconds of humming and adjusting, he finally found the feeling again. While Xianzhu ran and jumped, he continued with the unfinished surgery. As for the flaws that might result from this, who would care about it now? Right now, the virtual world of Luonan's left eye only had a route guide to the target location and a blood-red countdown timer marking the 1000th percentile. All of the basic interface layouts had disappeared. It was a field of emptiness, but it was clearly gestating an even more serious follow-up event. It was hard for Luonan's mind to turn to other thoughts after the initial instinctive reaction had passed. But before he could understand what was going on, Xianzhu suddenly spoke from the side in front of him. "Yes, understood. Workstation 1-95 temporary team." Luonan was stunned for a moment. He was pulled into a temporary channel at nearly the same time. He heard Go Ye's warning to Xianzhu. "You've lost your major for now, but don't be a cripple." Xianzhu spat. "How dare you say that? There is another person." Luonan saw it as well. Liang Lu had just joined in the temporary channel. This was Go Ye's introduction. "Two rookies, 0 battlefield experience. Right now they are under your command. The authority has been delegated to you." Right at this moment, an elevator already opened and waiting appeared before Luonan and Xianzhu's eyes. The two rushed in one after the other, and the carriage quickly descended. Xianzhu said a corny joke that was hard to understand in the temporary channel. "Did I just plunge all the way to the bottom?" Go Ye didn't give any more private orders. Instead, he suddenly called out to Liang Lu, who had just been pulled over. "Officer Xian? Luonan? Stay focused, little fellows." Xianzhu flaunted his seniority in a tone of voice. It was unknown what Liang Lu was thinking. In any case, Xianzhu didn't make another sound after saying this. Hopefully he would get used to this sooner. Luonan's thoughts flashed and the carriage door opened. Luonan's independent workstation appeared before his eyes. It was practically no different from workstation 4-92. Well, the situation with the two people hadn't changed. As the two people entered their workstations, this place entered a completely sealed state. The 1-minute countdown stopped. The virtual interface of his left eye entered a heart-palpitating state of complete emptiness. Luonan looked at Xianzhu. "Officer, you sit?" As he spoke, he placed the healing robot on the ground. Xianzhu cursed. He was limited by the length of the needle blade mechanical arm, so he had no choice but to sit cross-legged on the ground. He instantly became shorter than Luonan. The thoughts in Luonan's mind weren't that complicated. He just needed to free up his hands to inspect the concrete state of the workstation. First, he synchronized the data. There were no problems. Next, he checked the connection to the vertical collar dynamo core, signal conduction, and control. There were no problems either. There was also the maintenance mission. Luonan's figure swayed, and the vertical isolation cover in front of him suddenly made a pressing motion. It pressed down on his position, and the control panel in front of him was pushed forward. Luonan instinctively lowered his body to avoid a head-on collision. In the end, he sat down on the floor and was once again level with Xianzhu. Only now did Luonan remember that he had seen a similar situation in his previous simulation. The Earth Layer patroller was about to transform. It transformed from a maintenance mode to a high-speed propulsion mode. The internal transformation of the workstation was roughly like this. The upper and lower space was compressed, but the deeper space was slightly adjusted and enlarged. The overall space was compressed by at least half. There was already one more person and one more machine, so the space became even narrower. And because the isolation cover pressed down, the light from the outside world was completely cut off. The entire workstation shrunk to the abdomen of the large bug. The illumination was a bit dim, making the space feel even more cramped. Luonan and Xianxia squeezed together. The healing robot could only be placed on their knees. Since their positions weren't right, the treatment could only be paused. The smell of blood from the open wound pervaded the narrow space. Luonan didn't think much of it. He just recalled the contents of the one and only drill, fumbling with the control mode that had already changed. Oh, it seemed like something was missing. Looking for a protective ring? Xianxia chuckled twice. There should be a protective ring following us at this time, but a certain godly operator brought in a rapid 5+. It just so happens that we can experience the thrill of racing without any protection. We're just missing tactical mobility. Luonan let out an "oh" in response. Xianxia spat, "Rookie recruit. You can't be saved." Though Xianxia said this, the veteran Xianxia still pulled out 2 sets of magnetic ribbons from the narrow space. This was a relatively primitive manual fixing device. It was a backup safety measure in the event of a malfunction of the workstation protective ring. Under Xianxia's guidance, Luonan connected the ribbons to a few hidden anchors on the combat uniform, completing the most basic of defenses. At the same time, Xianxia contacted Liang Lu through the temporary channel. "Share your status, rookie. You need to show the value of enlisting half a year earlier." Liang Lu. Yes. In any case, Luonan and Liang Lu, these 2 recruits who had just experienced battle, completed everything they needed to do during the transformation period of the Earth Layer Patroller under Xianxia's rough supervision. Luonan even had a bit of time to find the control command for the panoramic simulation. The large bug buzzed as it started to accelerate, and the scene of the outside was reflected once more. He saw the dense mass of self-propelled machines below the abdomen of the robot. They seemed to never decrease in number. They were like wheat fields that had been struck by a storm under the impact of the incessant vibrations. Large swathes of machines collapsed to the point of being deformed. Chapter 923. After the beep, Lieutenant Goyi issued an order through the broadcast. "Everyone pay attention. You are about to enter an area of abnormal rules. Don your armor and execute a type of formation. Unarmored personnel are forbidden from being exposed to all non-enclosed areas." The broadcast was still ongoing. A flat, box-shaped mechanical construct rose from the lower part of the workstation, which was gradually deformed and reset. It slid to the side of Luonan's feet, who was still held in place by the magnetic belt. A slight ringing sound rang out behind Luonan's ear, echoing with the toy from a distance. This was proof of his status and authority. The mechanical construct suddenly deformed. The main material was clearly cold metal, but under the disassembly and assembly of complex and precise parts, it was like a sticky living thing that clung to Luonan's leg. It quickly spread to his waist and abdomen. The magnetic belt automatically unraveled, giving space to this mechanical construct. In another breath of time, this exoskeleton armor covered Luonan's entire body. It connected with his external vertical collar dynamo core. His breathing automatically entered the life support module and coordinated with the external energy furnace. Every time Luonan breathed, the armor seemed to expand and contract. It was as if the several dozen kilograms of metal had the same pulse. Technician's armor is a classic 7th edition. The attack and defense modules exist for the sake of maintaining its functionality. It's a typical example of a partner being happier than the user. Xianxia gave a timely explanation from the side. As for Luonan, there were no changes at all. "Don't doubt it. The so-called unarmored personnel is talking about me and himself." Xianxia pointed at the operation that was still ongoing on his back. Needless to say, there was still the infected endogenous dynamo core that was bound to his nervous system. Under these circumstances, it might be safer for him to be an unarmored personnel. The workstation space had already been restored as they spoke. The slight tilt didn't affect Luonan at all. Luonan naturally stood up. The all-encompassing metal visor automatically enhanced with panoramic simulation. It transformed the light signals of the outside world into a form that people were accustomed to seeing. But it also marked a deeper level of analytical data. Therefore, Luonan saw and measured the size of the crack that was rapidly approaching before his eyes. In the end, Luonan was able to see it. The infrastructure module labeled Gen 077 was created through a microscopic biological community similar to polyps. It was fed with energy on a large scale. It rapidly multiplied, guided, dyed, metallized, and shaped. Its vertical height was more than 140 meters, and it was deeply embedded in the rock layer. Its width was more than 200 meters and its thickness was a jaw-dropping 4 kilometers. In other words, this was an artificially bred mountain. Since it had been fed, since it was young, it was possible to design it before it was constructed. During the construction, special guidance technology could be used to set up spaces and channels inside the mountain. Of course, what was more important was the required structure and energy pathways. The structure of the relay station space-time fortress was closely related to these infrastructure modules, and they complemented each other. Just looking at such a colossus was enough to make one feel dejected. But now, an astonishing fissure was torn from the bottom all the way to the top, and it was from the outside to the inside. It pierced through the obstruction of light, allowing this terrifying scar to appear before Luonan's eyes. The Soil Patrol was a medium-sized maintenance platform. Even though it had shrunk after its transformation, it could still fit dozens of people. It was at least the size of a minibus. However, if such a platform were to be filled, it would barely be able to fill the crack at the bottom. Luonan immediately understood the meaning behind Xianzhu's words. Such an enormous project was absolutely not something that could be solved by a dozen or so maintenance soldiers. But here came the question: how did the fissure happen? Even though Xianzhu had warned him beforehand, Luonan couldn't help but think about it. The new spacetime fortress design was his work in the logic of the Interverse simulator. Luonan's previous self-righteous design had already brought about a major and negative influence to the relay station. Now, even the most basic defensive function had a problem? Before Luonan could finish his thought, the Soil Patrol had already recovered to its working state. After a limited deceleration, it charged into the depths of the fissure. The number of photons passing through the isolation shield instantly decreased by several magnitudes, but it was still enough for illumination. As for the most eye-catching part, it came from the long trail of fiery light in front of Luonan's eyes. But at the same time, the two sides of the fissure flickered with specks of light. Some of them looked more like the cross-section of an electrical circuit. Luonan could even see lightning piercing through the air to connect to the two sides of the fissure. It was like a lotus root was broken and the thread was still connected. The Soil Patrol pierced through these leaping bolts of lightning. Luonan narrowed his eyes behind his visor as he looked at these things. If he wasn't mistaken, these were all energy nodes embedded in the configuration. Even though a considerable portion of them had already been destroyed, the ones that still existed were still attempting to reassemble and restore their preset functional structure. So direct and efficient. Forcefully cleaved open? Luonan and Xianzhu's words rang out at practically the same time.